The characters that I've always loved are neither the hero or the villain. They operate somewhere in the middle, which I think is where most of humanity operates. And I think people like fallibility in a character. They like contradiction in a character. And they like spending time with these characters, even though you probably wouldn't want to spend time with them in your real day-to-day life. Hello, I'm Cillian, and this is how I became Thomas Shelby. I had been watching a lot of American television, like The Wire, which I loved, and I was kind of curious to know if there was anything happening in Britain, in the television world. So I asked my agent, and then a couple of days later, I had the script for Peaky Blinders. So it was sort of a combination of serendipity and great agenting, I guess. We started shooting the show in 2012, and if you Googled Peaky Blinders in 2012, you got one hit. So I knew very, very little about them. There was very little about them available to read. What I read a lot about the First World War and, you know, what the British soldiers would have gone through in the trenches in France. And then I read a lot about shell shock or PTSD. And then I read a lot about Britain between the wars. He's defined by that, particularly all the trauma of what he experienced in the First World War. He was what was called a clay kicker, which is basically a tunneler, and they would tunnel parallel or underneath the German lines. And then, you know, sometimes the German soldiers would break through and they would have these hand-to-hand combats. And you can imagine the tunnels would collapse on top of them. Sometimes it was probably one of the worst things you could have to do in one of the worst circumstances in the world in the First World War, you know. So he was profoundly altered and changed by that experience, and seeing how his, you know, friends and comrades, you know, blown up into pieces before him. So there was a line. There was Tommy before the war and Tommy after the war, and all through the series, up until series 6, he's still trying to come to terms with that trauma, I think. Being that close to death continuously made him unafraid to die. So when he came back to Birmingham, you know, they were just kind of spat back into society. They would, you know, no counseling or whatever. They were just there living with this trauma and sort of self-medicating, and they all had this access to violence. You know, it was a sort of a form of expression for them. And I think he just said, why not? You know, why not? I can't believe I'm actually here. I'm still alive. I'm just going to take everything that I can get. And then also he has this kind of, he's burdened by this intellect. So he operates at a different speed to everybody else and sees things at a different speed to everybody else and recognizes things at a different speed to everybody else. So that kind of drives him. So there's this relentless kind of why not ambition to him, and this lack of fear of death. We were very keen that they had a distinctive look, the Peaky Blinders, and Steve Knight had written that they had the peaked caps, and that's part of where the name comes from. The haircuts were, that was a kind of a gradual thing, getting to trying to persuade the actors to go that brutal with the haircut. And we had a brilliant makeup and hair designer called La Schiavo, and she had a book of these criminals from Australia in the 1920s, and they all had this brutal haircut. So we thought that would be a very good look for the gang, would make them distinctive, you know. So we all eventually succumbed and capitulated and allowed our heads to be shorn. And then, yeah, it became this kind of silhouette. The cap and the three-piece suit and the jacket just became this kind of silhouette that worked really well for the gang.
You're wearing the Black Madonna. You gypsy.
But the part of me that dreams is gypsy.
I think family is probably the most important. I think it's the most important thing in the Peaky Blinders. It is a dysfunctional, messed up family. and it's constantly shifting. The dynamic is always shifting, and I think his position is never secure. I think his closest confidant is Polly, and he trusts her more than anybody else. And when he loses Polly, it's very hard to operate like that. I think she was kind of the beating heart of Peaky Blinders. She's phenomenal actor, an incredible human being, and you know, it's not the same without her. We all desperately miss her, and you know, this series will be dedicated to her memory, and her character still is very important in series 6.
Want a drink, Lizzie? I've had a hard day.
I don't drink whiskey or gin anymore, Tom.
Why not?
Because they say it harms the baby. Yes, it can only be yours.
His relationship with Lizzie is very, very complicated, and she is actually, like, really wants to be there for him and wants to support him, but again, he's just so messed up that he can't take advantage of that. And in this series, the Tommy Lizzie storyline is actually amazing. It's one of the best storylines in it. But yeah, I think the whole thing is family. Family's at the core of it. It's a family gangster saga. So Grace's death, I think that's one of the biggest moments in the 6th series, and I don't think he properly recovers from that ever, because again, he never deals with anything emotionally, so he's not processing it. And then you know, she haunts him still in series 5. And then Lizzie's such a fantastic character, and if only Tommy had some sense, he would just stick with Lizzie, but because he's so up, he gets it wrong all the time, you know. And in series 6, like the scenes between myself and Natasha Keith are some of my favorite. They're really, really powerful.
We will discuss our business on Sunday, on the agreed day, at the allotted time, and at the place that has already been determined. You made your point. Good night, Mr. Shelby.
Sam Neill is such a wonderful actor, and he himself and myself had some fantastic scenes in series 1 and series 2. That was a real thrill working with Sam Neill. Obviously the scenes with Tom Hardy are always a gift, you know, to play opposite him. They're always kind of delicious scenes in terms of dialogue and the tension between the two. Me and Tom always get on really well. It's always fun to do scenes with him. He's such a fantastic actor. And you know, the energy between Alfie and Tommy is so completely the opposite of each other. That's why I think those scenes work, you know. And we kind of shoot them like theater, you know. They're big, long, 20-minute takes. And when you have a fine actor like Tom Hardy, it's always a joy to do those scenes. Paddy Considine, I think he was probably one of the most despicable characters in Peaky Blinders. Yeah, we've been lucky that so many actors want to come and play it on the show. It's very hard to speak about it when you're inside of the thing and sort of have some perspective on it. I mean, the characters that I've always loved are neither the hero or the villain. They operate somewhere in the middle, which I think is where most of humanity operates. And I think people like fallibility in a character. They like contradiction in a character. And they like spending time with these characters, even though you probably wouldn't want to spend time with them in your real day-to-day life. You know, each series has been, like I said, it's been a different sort of version of Tommy and a different experience each series. We've had amazing directors, different director on each series.
Kimber and me fought this battle one-on-one. It's over. Go home to your families.
We've always had amazing locations. We shot in Manchester and Liverpool, and we've used a lot of the sort of the Victorian architecture that remains there, and that is amazing. And it's been great to sort of track that arc from them living in Watery Lane, which is these you know, these old tiny terraced houses, and then he lives in this huge mansion at the end, or what and I think it's a tribute to the production designers on this show that they've always been really imaginative and ambitious for the locations, because, you know, we don't have a huge budget, but it looks expensive, so I'm always proud of that. I really love the ballet sequence in series 5 when there's a party at Tommy's house and there's a ballet going on, and then Linda gets shot. I think that was brilliantly executed and directed. I like that scene where Tommy climbs out of the grave in series 2. There's so many, you know, it's hard to pick. It's really hard to pick. I really enjoyed the storyline, you know, the Mosley storyline in series 5. And that this sort of rise of fascism in Britain, that was fascinating to read about that. It's not gone away. It doesn't go away, and it was interesting to deal with that, because, you know, that actually happened in Britain, and you know, I didn't know so much about the rise of fascism in Britain. So I think that Tommy's well used to corruption, and, you know, politics is corrupt, so he's well able to handle all of that. And it's interesting, though, I do believe, even though he's surrounded by corruption in politics, I do think he actually wants to do some good when he is a politician. I think he firmly believes he is a true socialist, and I think he really wants to do good. That's one of the few things I feel that it's very pure for him, you know. There's a myriad of things. It's really hard to reduce it to one thing. There is so much about him. I can't quite fathom him, you know. I'm so unlike him. I'm such a coward. And I love sleeping. He never sleeps. He never eats. He's relentless. I don't know. I think the one thing is, I don't know, would that man ever rest? Would he ever be at peace? I don't know if he ever would. Oh, I think his best trait is probably his intelligence and his ingenuity. His worst trait, I'd say, a sort of a lack of complete self-knowledge. I would not ever take life lessons from Thomas Shelby. He's the wrong man to take life lessons from. No, I don't. You know, I don't do this job to learn stuff. It's not really why I do it. My job is to just kind of serve the material, give the raw materials to the director to make the best show they can. It's almost like in every series, you know, there's a new version of Tommy, and I can never ever predict what it's going to be, because Steve Knight is such a brilliantly unpredictable writer. But yes, I think people will be surprised by the version of Tommy they find at the beginning of 6. He's made some decisions